Hi.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Raptors. All right. Today is podcast number 5, Aging as a Disease. And this one kind of wraps up and threads together the prior 4 podcasts. And I think the main idea is that Dr. Green wants to get across, even though we haven't covered cancer or diabetes, metabolic disease, those are important too. But I think these first 5 are really what he really wanted to impress. His theory of aging as a disease, Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease specifically. So
The first one was how Dr. Green discovered rapamycin in his personal serendipitous story.
right,
So,
right. And we never told the story of how rapamycin was discovered. That's so cool too. We got to do that in future ones. We're coming up with some ideas the better we get, maybe Q&A and origin stories and that kind of thing. But this one's interesting. My little brain just kind of sees aging as a disease, which Dr. Green describes different than age disease states driven by mTOR. So that aging is a disease, but TOR does not target that disease. We eventually die, our heart stops, we lose energy production, which is you'll describe and Dr. Green will describe. But if we can target all the other age-related diseases, we will live out that lifespan without any health issues. That's my takeaway.
potentially,
Potentially.
it will definitely help with rapamycin. It helps with preventing age-related diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease. It doesn't necessarily help with this energy mitochondria energy production decrease with age over time. So basically, Dr. Green discusses how mitochondrial energy production decreases with age. He presents a 2023 study by a biologist named Thomas Borkham, who Dr. Green considers a giant in the field of aging for coming up with this and issuing this study. And the study is on how the Krebs cycle controls the rate of aging. He goes on to say that the greatest unsolved challenge in anti-aging is how to have the mitochondria produce more energy and not turn down energy production with age. So it's another pro-aging pathway, and that means that there might be options for drugs to target that and prevent that energy decrease with age over time. Mm-hmm. And it's a very detailed, very chemistry, biology oriented presentation, but you'll probably hum along. If you're a chemist or biologist, scientist, you'll probably get it all.
This is for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, so let's let Dr. Green do his thing.
All righty. Here you go.
Hi, Dr. Green. Hi, Michelle. Hello, Raptors.
Hello.
Raptors. Hi.
Today we're going to complete a first series of podcasts. It's our 5th one, and it's going to kind of wrap up this this series. And we're going to talk about aging, aging as a disease, the disease of aging. And Dr. Green is going to kick that off.
Okay. A lot of people say nobody dies of aging. People just die of age-related diseases. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be more wrong than that statement. Today, I'm going to be talking about aging, the thing that most people die from in old age. So basically, the idea of aging is aging can be divided into two basic sort of like ideas: the basic disease of aging and age-related diseases. Both of these are major causes of death. Before we get to that, I'm going to sum up the basic concepts of aging we discussed in previous podcasts. So the most important concept of aging is that aging is controlled by genes, like every other trait in living things. It's a completely regulated trait. So, especially in mammals. So the reason for the great success in mammals is mammals have evolved a mechanism to have a relatively short lifespan. This is extraordinarily important for evolution and why mammals rule the world as opposed to reptiles. The idea is that left to their own devices, animals can live a very, very long time. The problem with old animals is old animals don't have the new genes. The new genes come from the new generation. Each new generation can evolve new genes. Some are good, some are bad. And evolution is about having the animals with the old genes, bad genes, you don't have to worry about, they die. But the animals with the beneficial genes, you want to introduce those beneficial genes into the breeding pool. And in order to do that, you have to prune the old animals. So the old animals, which don't have these beneficial new genes, don't dominate the breeding pool. But it's the young animals with the new genes that dominate the breeding pool, and therefore evolution proceeds fast. Mammals evolved that, and that's why mammals were able to evolve with the elimination of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. Mammals were able to evolve so quickly and very quickly take over the earth. That's because they had programmed aging, a relatively short lifespan, and they could evolve real fast. So the idea about a lifespan is a very critical point for survival. You have to have a lifespan long enough so everybody has a chance to sort of like reproduce, but you don't want it to have it too long. But so it can't be too short, it can't be too long. By a matter of trial and error, animals evolve the best lifespan, and then they evolve mechanisms to maintain the best lifespan. So you have programmed aging being controlled by genes. The old idea, which like dominated aging for like 150 years, was called evolutionary theory, that you couldn't have any genes that promoted aging, and aging was bad, was completely false. It's a completely, totally false idea, a totally lack of understanding of what's going on with evolution and aging, and how aging and death of older animals is playing an extraordinarily important role in facilitating rapid evolution. Okay, so once you understand that you have to have programmed death, the next question is, what are the programmed death pathways? And it turned out that there's two basic pathways. One presents itself as the basic disease of aging, and the other presents itself as age-related diseases. It turns out I'm going to be talking about today aging, the thing that people say nobody dies of. The problem is, people have pathologists have been able to see age-related diseases for over 100 years at autopsy. The age-related diseases cause discrete changes in different organisms, or discrete changes in different organs. This is very apparent at autopsy. the classic age-related disease is coronary heart disease. That's a major cause of death in middle-aged people. So middle-aged people are generally very good problems are dominated by age-related diseases. And this is sort of like the dominant thing that's going on between, say, 55 and 85, age-related diseases. It turns out that the age-related diseases are driven by mTOR, and blocking mTOR with rapamycin is extraordinarily effective about age-related diseases. It's very effective against coronary heart disease, and it's very effective against Alzheimer's disease in young people. Well, not young people, say like middle-aged people. So like Alzheimer's disease could be divided into two diseases: a disease of 3/4 of the population that's not E4 positive. And for them, it's basically age-related diseases occurring in old age, 85 and so forth, to 90 and so on. And they have a very short survival. Then there's another 25% who are E4 positive, and for them, it's a totally different situation. It's the E4 promotes premature dementia, in which for the very, very, very serious 2 to 3% who are double E4, they'll be presenting at a median age of 70. And for the people who have 1 E4, even though they're just 25% of the population, they're getting the great majority of cases of dementia prior to age 80. So this is the very tragic presentation of dementia presenting in relatively young people. It turns out that rapamycin is a miracle drug in this age group, and this sort of like type, a miracle drug for preventing of Alzheimer's disease in people who have 1 or 2 E4 genes. Okay, so we've talked about that before. Age-related diseases are very well recognized. You can see them in autopsy. And mTOR is very, very effective in stopping these age-related diseases. The basic disease of aging itself presents itself mostly in people 85, 90, 95, 100, this kind of people. It's sort of like the basic disease of aging is best seen in 90-year-old marathon runners. Now, marathon running is very interesting because humans are the premier long-distance runners of any kind of animal. Nobody can keep up with humans. It's for running a period of 2 hours. Wolves are faster, dogs are faster, a lot of animals are faster, but nobody can keep up with humans when it comes to a 2-hour run, 26 miles. So this is a very good marker of humans' ability. The top humans, the best runners who have trained, they can run a marathon in just over 2 hours, basically 13 miles an hour, which is absolutely phenomenal. 13 miles an hour for 2 hours. And a 90-year-old runner, it takes them, and these are the best of the best, it takes them about 9 hours. 9 hours is a little less than walking at 3 miles an hour. So they've gone from being humans as they got older, went from being able to run 13 miles an hour to barely 3 miles an hour for like 2 hours. The difference is energy. So the difference is the development of ATP. ATP is a stored energy. ATP is like critical. And that's what's sort of like the basic disease of aging is about. It's about energy metabolism and failure to produce sufficient energy to be vigorous and then and then eventually failing to produce sufficient energy to stay up.
ATP stand for?
AU, so like a ATP.
Up on the slide, I think. It's adenosine triphosphate or something like that.
Adenosine triphosphate, ATP. So what the ATP is basically stored energy. The ATP is produced by mitochondria in a process called oxidative phosphorylation, and that glucose is metabolized first through the Krebs cycle or the TCA cycle, tricarboxylic acid cycle, to an intermediate, and then those intermediates are then fed into the electron transport chain, where the end product is production of ATP. So the initial thing being produced in the Krebs cycle is what's called NADH or FADH2, and these two things are fed into the electron transport chain, where they are then sort of like produce ATP. So so it turns out that the fundamental change in aging is a change in energy metabolism, energy production at the level of mitochondria. That's why you can understand why this disease is not recognized. When you do an autopsy, you don't see mitochondria. You don't see how much ATP mitochondria is making. This is nothing that you can see in an autopsy. And since you can't see this in an autopsy, it wasn't recognized as a thing. So, but it's basically something that was determined by people doing basic science. So now let's go to the first chart by Rivera. Okay, this is an incredible, important chart. It's from a paper entitled Discrete Changes in Glucose Metabolism During Aging, the first name being Rivera, the last name being Fransoni, in 2019. And basically, what they said is the ATP AM ratio is a marker of biologic age. Now, you can see this is a little different than a Horvath, biologic clock. What Horvath and biologic clock is doing is it's showing how the body keeps track. It's like showing the methylation changes, and based on that, how the body knows its biologic age. It's very important for the body to know its biologic age, because aging is a timed event. It's doing things like menopause. It has to know what age it is. Is this the right age? It's doing things like puberty. Is this the right age? If it's turning on death pathways that promote aging, it wants to turn it on at the right age is programmed to do that. Not too late, not too early. And so the methylation age tells the body what age it is. But then the body has to act on that through genetic pathways. And this is the genetic pathway it uses to act on that. It's changed into sort of like metabolism of glucose. Now, in measuring this, what they do is they look at mononuclear cells in the peripheral blood. That means the regular blood you have lymphocytes. They're the most common. They're 80% of mononuclear cells. To isolate the mononuclear cells from the blood, peripheral blood, and then they can study them. They can study the intracellular mechanisms that's going on. And all these cells are basically, they're all under the same genetic control. They're all pretty much the same. And what they determined was that the ATP AM ratio told you how old the body was from the point of view of producing energy, which was the critical type of thing. And this sort of, so the ratio changed because with age, the AMP part increased, and that was reflecting more production of energy, impaired energy production. And you can see in the sort of like age group between 0 to 30, there's very little change. Just staying the same, it's about 3. And then between 30 to 40, it drops down somewhat. 40 to 50, it has a big drop. So right now, 50, you have a lot less production of energy. And then you have a small drop every decade, but it tends to level off after like 80. I always say the reason it's leveling off after 80 is the oldest animals, the oldest cells are just dying. So they're being removed, and all you have, and once you're getting below a certain level, once you're getting below an ATP, so a good ratio was 3. That was healthy. Once you're getting to an AMP ratio of 1, what you're going to be having is more, especially then going to have the animals are not going to be making, the people are not going to be making enough energy to survive. And basically almost nobody is getting to an ATP AM ratio of 0.5. They all died before they got there. So this is sort of like, shows the basic concept of what's going on with the basic disease of aging is a decreased production of ATP in mitochondria. This makes sense in that ATP is a fundamental part of life. In other words, that mitochondria generating energy is as fundamental as life gets. So it shows here that programmed death is basically pulling the plug on energy production. It's not happening fast, but it's slowly decreasing the amount of energy production going on as people are getting older from a very, very high level of ATP when up until 30, and then a decline, and then in the 70 to 80 group, a low level of ATP, and this is reflected in a low level of energy, and dramatically reflected in a 90-year-old or 80-year-old trying to run a marathon. And can do it, but they're doing it very, very slowly.
Dr. Green, I have a question about the chart and how to read it. So you've got these, 2 rectangles that are put.
Bottom of the chart is the age in decades, going from 0.
I know that, and I know what a ratio is. So I know so there's ATP divided by AMP. But in terms of the visual part, the part with the little rectangles and the lines coming out of them, is the top part of the rectangle ATP and the bottom part, or in the whole part
all the ratio, but what it is different people at different numbers. So if you had the basic box, they have like the average steroid thing with the line in the middle being like the median number. But then there's sort of like some outliers who are very high and some outliers who
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, that's what that
What
is.
is AMP?
the AMP is adenosine monophosphate. So basically, there's like 3 phosphate groups or 1 phosphate group. ATP, 1 phosphate group, AMP, ATP, 3 phosphates, triphosphate, AMP, 1 phosphate. And depending upon the ratio, this reflects the status of the energy metabolism. What's going on with the energy metabolism? And it turns out that when they can measure how well it's going along by looking at the ratio of these two things.
So the ATP part that is AMP also changing or just ATP?
It's changing because the AMP is increasing. The AMP is getting higher, and that's increasing.
Okay. Okay. So AMP is increasing, which is making the ratio smaller.
They're saying if you look at the ATP ratio in lymphocytes, and you get a number like 1, just reflecting a biologic age of around 80 or 90. And if you get a number around 3, just reflecting a biologic age of 30 or 20 to 30. And just sort of like 2 is more like, or 2 is around 40. But you can see
the measurement is the line through the center of the rectangular area. And that's the value. So we're saying for 0 to 10, the mean value or whatever it is about, I don't know, 3.7 or something like that.
It's like 0 to 10, they have highest levels of energy production. But then in the 10 to 30 age group, they're staying the same and they're having a very effective level.
Mm-hmm.
Then it starts going down from 30 to 40. And that's when you see age, like you see the beginning of aging developing. You know, but it's not becoming real apparent to 50. So what you'd expect to be seeing here, if you go back to the marathon runners, a 30-year-old marathon runner being a world champion running in 2 hours, and a 50-year-old one being a whole lot slower.
Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do about this, Dr. Green? How are we going to keep the ratio?
What we're going to do about it is we're going to sort of like wait to some other sort of like world-class scientists to figure out how we can upregulate the production of ATP as we get older. But what the target is.
Is anybody doing anything along those lines right now?
Well, let's go to the next chart.
Okay.
Okay, great. This is from a paper from Jonathan Borkham. Jonathan Borkham is at the cutting edge of understanding aging, the disease of aging. And this paper is from a May 2023 paper entitled The Tricarboxylic Acid Cycle, which is another name for the Krebs cycle, as a central regulator of the rate of aging, implications for metabolic interventions. I was like extraordinary, we're fortunate that Jonathan Borkham actually came to visit me in Little Neck. He was here to visit somebody else, but he stopped by here to see me. So it was like very, very nice. He was like, because I considered him one of the leading sort of like researchers of our day. And so he's focusing on the Krebs cycle, or like what he calls the tricarboxylic acid cycle, and how that is a central regulator of aging. And so this is something, it has 8 different sort of like substrates, like citrates, or fumarate, oxy, so forth. You can see that. And they just go around in a circle, metabolizing. So like things, what's being fed into them is fatty acids or pyruvate from glucose, and they're being used to generate NADH or FADH2, which is then fed into the electron transport chain, which ends up with the end production of ATP. This is all taking place in the mitochondria. But the critical thing is not these things, citrate, isocitrate. The critical things is the enzymes. Each one of these steps has an enzyme, and the enzyme is regulating the rate at which the energy is being produced. So if you could sort of like change those sort of like enzymes to producing more energy, you'd be slowing down aging. And what there probably is another sort of like enzyme which acts on the basic enzyme. So if you have an enzyme like this one, a kinase, or you'd expect that the something else that's turning that off, just sort of like something else that's making that, that's inhibiting that. And so if you could do something like have a monoclonal antibody that was stopping that, you could have these enzymes, you could change the sort of like activity of these enzymes. So that'd be like the fundamental part of regulating aging, something that they could do to change the activity of these enzymes so that you're developing more of the NADH and FADH2 to feed into the electron transport chain to wind up with more ATP. However, we can affect this a little bit right now. And it turns out that rapamycin, caloric restriction, fasting, a keto diet, and exercise all affect this sort of like TCA cycle, and all those things which are known to increase lifespan were like shown to have affecting the activity of the TCA cycle. So it's like you can see that if you affect the TCA cycle, say like caloric restriction or keto diet or rapamycin, you increase lifespan, you slow aging. The problem is the effect is small. Maybe it's like 5%, and maybe you're in aging, you're really having a decrease of 75%. So you're getting just a small effect of these things, but still, that's how you're getting, it seems like that's how rapamycin and caloric restriction and a keto diet is increasing lifespan by its effect on this TCA cycle. So this is the basic concept of the basic disease of aging. And this goes directly from the previous paper. The previous paper of ATP-AMP ratio is reflecting what's going on in the TCA cycle. So this is basically representing the basic disease of aging, So when people say nobody dies of aging, they just die of age-related diseases, completely false. You could see that in the sort of like 90-year-old marathon runner, and the world's best is just making enough ATP to run a marathon in 9 hours. Well, for the rest of us, we're winding up with not having enough ATP in old age to sustain life, and that results in death by cardiac arrest. So you'd expect, so heart, if it's not having the proper amount of energy, it's going to fail, it's going to have a cardiac arrest, it's going to develop arrhythmia. It's going to manifest, it's going to present itself that way. The problem is that doesn't show up in an autopsy. In an autopsy, they can't see, they're not measuring the ATP, AMP level of peripheral blood. First of all, you couldn't do it after death because everything is stopped. And you're not seeing any changes in autopsy. The only thing that changes in autopsy is the age-related diseases the person has. And you'll always find some kind of age-related disease, like some degree of coronary disease, and they'll say that's what the person died from. But that is nothing to do with the person's cause of death. Right? If the coronaries are right, in other words, not having significant obstruction, not things less than 7% or 50%, even though they have coronary disease, it's having absolutely nothing to do with the cause of death. So you have two basic causes of death. Middle-aged people die of the usual middle-aged disease, like age-related diseases, like having an acute myocardial infarction. And then you have somebody 90 years old being perfectly, like being in the usual state of health, just fairly frail, and then dying in their sleep. And that dying, and then that's sort of like real characteristic of death from the primary disease of aging.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Green, I have a question. So when we see these rapamycin curves where they show how rapamycin extends life in mice, you can see some of these mice living 20% longer than, there's different studies, but some I think have even shown 30% in some conditions. So that would be a combination of both age-related disease.
The problem is extension of lifespan in mice is a special thing. It's basically all you're showing is rapamycin slows down cancer. In other words, the mice, 90% of the death in mice is due to cancer. So all the statistics and all the life extension is coming up from the fact that the mice are dying of cancer. They're dying of the same cancers they would have been dying from, but they're dying of cancers later.
Mm-hmm.
And the mice who don't die of cancer, they can have also a decrease in lifespan through other things, but the statistics are enormously skewed in that we're not seeing really an effect on aging. We're seeing the anti-cancer effect.
Okay, I understand.
So, yeah, in other words, you get a better, I think you have to see what's going on with humans, because the problem with mice is because cancer is so totally dominating to the cause of death. 90% of that is basically, and like originally some people were saying when they originally did these studies, they were saying, no, rapamycin is not an extending lifespan. it's like preventing cancer. In other words, the mice are just not dying of cancer. Well, that was like very much true. But in addition to that, when they looked at other changes in the mice, they could see there were other age-related changes, but they probably were not the thing that was causing their deaths. They were basically, in other words, the mice are dying of cancer. So you get it's like basically that's what sort of like rapamycin is showing in mice. It slows down getting cancer.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've even heard it slowed down, decreased periodontal disease in mice and all kinds of other things too.
There's all these diseases that are sort of like, there's a whole host of diseases that are basically age-related diseases that are mTOR diseases. There are chronic inflammation diseases. So like periodontal disease as like a chronic inflammation disease of mTOR. And when you have diseases caused by chronic inflammation driven by mTOR, blocking mTOR with rapamycin is extraordinarily effective in stopping these diseases. So rapamycin turns out to be very effective in stopping periodontal disease in the people who have sort of like severe periodontal disease. They dramatically notice. And there was, one of my patients, he said, the dentist said to him, "Well, I see that you're finally flossing all every day." He said, "He's not flossing at all." He said,
That's funny.
I have a question. I have a question. Okay, so Dr. Green, is what you're saying that we die from age-related disease that is affected by TOR, or we live a long life and we die from the disease of aging, which is the result of low ATP, which
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Happens with heart failure. Okay, but so that low ATP and your heart failing as a result has nothing to do with mTOR?
It's playing a very small role. That's why, like rapamycin, is not extending the maximum lifespan to any great degree. Rapamycin is dramatically decreasing age-related diseases, and because people aren't dying of age-related diseases, they're living longer. But once they start approaching just sort of like old age, then things are being dominated by the basic disease of aging, ATP production, and rapamycin is already having a small impact. You can see it's having a small impact on increasing a little bit, like Walker was saying, rapamycin, caloric restriction, a keto diet, exercise, all those things were affecting the TCA cycle. All of them were affecting the basic disease of aging, but it was only having a small effect.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to get, in other words, rapamycin is basically a drug to keep you very, very healthy in middle age.
Until you die.
Until you get to old age, and then it becomes much, much less effective. If that's sort of like at old age, we need new developments, a new understanding of aging, something to control the ATP production, something that will change to sort of like ATP AM ratio, and like in the lymphocytes, the peripheral mononuclear cells. If you had that, you wouldn't have to sort of like wait for like lifespan to go over and over. You simply see it in an old person, a 90-year-old person running a marathon in 5 hours. That would be an extraordinary accomplishment that would show that they had completely changed the energy metabolism.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I find it very interesting too that is he a medical doctor? He's a psychiatrist, isn't he? Borkham?
He's he's all sorts of things. He's basically a biochemist, but he was also in the field of neurology, psychiatry. He is also in that field and doing that, and working with headaches and things like that. But he is basically a professor of biochemistry.
Well, thank you, Dr. Borkham.
In other words, this paper, in just a very recent paper, 2023, in which he said that the TCA cycle is a central regulator of aging, that was a totally new concept. And then in that paper, he supported it with the other papers, like the one I showed by Rivera, showing the sort of like energy metabolism. But Borkham was the first one, I would say, to focus on the idea that the energy production and the TCA cycle, which like the Krebs cycle, this is the central regulation of of aging itself, as opposed to age-related diseases. But there's like interaction between this, and that aging also has a somewhat deleterious effect on the age-related diseases, but most of the age-related diseases are very much related to mTOR, and they're like mTOR is like extraordinarily effective in stopping the basic age-related diseases. And in other words, you can basically, it can definitely be stopping heart attacks, although it's not going to stop people from dying at old age due to heart failure.
Because you don't have any energy production.
Right, exactly.
So, can I ask a question? I've heard that, and which I don't tend to believe, that you're born with a certain number of heartbeats, but the heart is a muscle, right? So if you're
that idea, that's a nonsense idea that you're born with heartbeats. That's a total nonsense idea.
Okay, that's
like,
what I thought. So you can't extend your.
That it was slow, like taking a beta blocker and slowing your heart rate from 80 to 50. So it's not going to make you live longer.
Right.
That's just like the field of aging has basically been total junk science for 200 years. It's still totally dominated by junk science. The difference is now we have a lot of leading scientists who are coming up with profound ideas about what's going on. But that doesn't eliminate all the junk science.
So is this NAD stuff, this nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide? I see a lot of people that think that that's like needed for anti-aging, but
it's a popular infusion.
I don't. In order to sort of like show something is like working, you have to show extension of lifespan.
They haven't done that. I know that. I know that the studies. I know there's a lot of debate over that, and
sure.
and because they're saying that they're selling it as a longevity drug, and yet the data doesn't back it up.
Yeah, if something was working, you get dramatic data. If something is not working, you get very, very borderline data. But if something is really working, you will get very, very dramatic data. In other words, it's as simple as looking at a marathon runner. If you were sort of like saying, oh, yeah, like in other words, if NAD is supposed to be treating aging, there's energy production, and marathon runners were taking that, and they were suddenly running a whole bunch faster at old age. Well, that would prove what was going on. But I don't see anything like that.
Yeah, I think there's, there's some of the professors and the researchers that are making money on this now are not seen in very great light. I understand.
The problem is the people who are writing papers and popular people and gurus, and then to the people who are doing the basic science research who are not doing anything. They're like very, very quiet. They're writing sort of like obscure papers like Jonathan Walcomb's paper. They're not sort of like making sort of like, they're not in the limelight.
Yeah, they're not selling supplements, and they don't have a business where they've, but I do believe that Matt Kaberlin is really first rate in terms of looking at the science. So, and not, trying.
Matt Kaberlin was studying sort of like the effect of sort of like rapamycin for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So he's a leading sort of like person in the effect of rapamycin, and he's sort of like showing its effect on sort of like dogs, which is very, very, very interesting. Life extension first showed that the dogs are sort of like affecting the heart, and now it's sort of like going to be showing increasing lifespan in dogs. So that's going to be very, very impressive.
Yeah, well, they're like the mice. They're not going to be dying of cancer as quickly and things like that. So, yeah.
Just extending lifespan of dogs will be very, very impressive because the dogs aren't dying of cancer to any great degree. They're dying of other things. They're dying of heart disease and heart failure. They're dying of much, much more like what humans are dying from. Extending lifespan in dogs will be profound.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you know if there's any data out from his studies yet, Dr. Green, with the dogs? I mean, other than the smaller study he did a few years ago?
There's a huge amount of sort of like data out right now about dogs, lifespan of dogs, and rapamycin. And it's basically, I have a ton of dogs on rapamycin. In other words, to people who I have patients who simply give their dogs rapamycin, and their dogs are living a real long time.
That's great.
Is that study finished, or is it still ongoing?
It's ongoing for a long time.
This study is ongoing. My study is sort of like as far as when patients with dogs, they report all the time that their dogs are just getting way, way older than you'd expect them to get.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is very, very good because it's like nothing better than a sort of like a good dog.
Do you have any
Nothing better than a
examples?
good dog.
Do you have any examples, Dr. Green?
Example? I know people are just telling me they have their dog and so forth, and the dog is 15 or 17 years old, and the dog is doing real good. Eventually they die, but they're clearly living a lot longer than you'd expect them to be living. I mean, it's like, it's not a formal study. I don't even know. I have no idea how many. I have no idea, no control. People just have their rapamycin, and they give rapamycin to their dogs. It's that I have no control of what they after I prescribe the rapamycin to them. I have zero control of what they do with it. And
I mean, I was just wondering, say, a Great Dane, for example, they're very unlikely to live past 10 because they're so big. I was wondering if you have I have this Great Dane and he's 18 years old.
Exactly, yes. So the big dogs have an average lifespan, I think like Great Dane, 77 years. A Chihuahua is 20 years plus. So you see it dramatically in the big dogs. It increases the lifespan, the life of the big dogs very much.
Right.
But that's just sort of stories from my patients about their dogs.
Yeah, it's anecdotal, but still, it's
everybody is
it makes sense.
Everybody is extremely happy about how well their dogs are doing. And it's reflecting the same sort of stuff that Matt Cable is doing. Matt Cable was this thing, and he said the dogs are doing real good, and then there are any side effects. And my patients are telling me that their dog is doing very nicely.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
So it looks like, I would say, if people can stay healthy for another 10 years, in another 10 years, there might be dramatic improvements in the basic disease of aging.
Yep. So
It was changing.
we're in that category, Michelle. We're in the right age. We can live 10 years with rapamycin. I mean, I look at
Change this sort of like, cycle pathways. In other words, so new things that are going to be impacting on aging itself, as opposed to rapamycin, which does a very good job in middle age and to new things that sort of like impact on aging itself. But you can see if people start off with the idea that nobody dies of aging, people just die of age-related diseases, that's not very helpful for their research. It's a lot more helpful if people say the fundamental disease of aging is extremely important. But you have the idea in Japan, aging is a leading cause of death in Japan on death certificates. So on Japan, people die of aging. In the United States, nobody dies of aging. It's basically,
it's just a matter of terminology, though, because you could consider this
you can't.
other disease of aging, this lack of energy, right? It's not a middle-aged disease.
Right. But what I'm saying is, you can't write on a death certificate cause of death, old age, and have it fly. It's going to be rejected. It's going to be said right now, like turn back and say, like, old age is not a cause of death. You need to come up with the cause of death. And then the person will say, okay, they died of atherosclerotic heart disease. So the same person who's sort of like, who in like Japan, you can certify they died of old age. In the United States, you absolutely cannot do that. That will not be accepted by the people in charge of the statistics. That will not be accepted by the health department. If you're in a medical examiner's office, you can't write somebody died of old age. It's like no way. Come up with some other cause of death.
Well,
it's really interesting, and I learned a lot from this, Dr. Green.
Very good, thank you.
So I know, Dr. Green, that these first 5 podcasts were really the most important information that I think you wanted to relay. And I'm wanting to see if we can do maybe a Q&A for the next time. So put it out there for anybody, once these are out on
anything that you think would be a good idea, fine with me. Very happy to do anything. I'm feeling real high energy today. Very happy to do anything you guys want to do.
Wonderful.
That's such great news.
Okay, well, shall we wrap this up?
Okay, great. Bye.
Bye, Dr. Green. Thank you so much.
Bye, Dr. Green.